Good afternoon, I'm Shane Masters with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com. Despite the increased numbers of homicides reported up to the end of March, National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang says the country is not experiencing a spike in murders. In an interview with our news center, Mr. Chang explains that the police have been focusing on reducing gang violence, but the latest murders are actually acquaintance violence. Sandra Williams has the details.
According to police statistics, from January 1 to March 30 this year, the country recorded 368 murders compared to 351 for the corresponding period in 2020. That's 17 more murders, equating to a 5% increase. Despite the numbers, National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang says the country is not experiencing a spike in murders. He explains that although inter-gang killings are down, the latest spate of murders has been particularly traumatic.
They're not spiking yet, but it is what we're having is some very traumatic activity, especially as related to acquaintance violence. Acquaintance violence is more, inter-family acquaintance is more traumatic because when it happens, everybody can identify it. So that could it happen to me? And that's what traumatizes the psyche of the people.
The security minister adds that the recent incidents of people being killed by persons known to them are worrying, and it will require high-quality policing to prevent other such deaths. Dr. Chang notes that while there has been significant emphasis placed on reducing gang violence, the police will now have to give more attention to acquaintance violence.
The increase in what is acquaintance violence is particularly worrying. It will require not only extremely high-quality policing and some changes in terms of how we approach. There's policy to cover it, but in the execution, we have to look at how we deal with that now, because while we keep men deployed to deal with the gangs, we'll have to be very sensitive to complaints when we receive them in terms of the potential for acquaintance violence.
He says there's also a need to increase the number of police personnel available to deal with such violence.
You could see in the case of the individual who was chopped in a square, I forget exactly which square, a police was nearby, and that reflects also the need to have more of our manpower deployed in certain spaces. We have expanded recruiting, we have expanded the facilities by training, and therefore expect over the next 2 to 3 years to really get our numbers to where it should be, so there can be more officers in the critical spaces.
Recently, Prime Minister Andrew Holness said in the short term, his government is depending on the zones of special operations and hopefully the return of the states of public emergency to address Jamaica's crime problem. Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
To COVID-19 related news now. 350 new cases of the coronavirus were recorded on Monday. The number of confirmed cases now stands at 41,328. Kingston and St. Andrew recorded most of the new cases with 66, followed by St. Catherine with 48 and St. Anne with 38. Meanwhile, 388 persons remain in hospital, 33 are critically ill. There are 21,971 active cases. In the meantime, 4 more Jamaicans have died from COVID-19. These include 2 from Kingston and St. Andrew, 1 each from St. Catherine and Portland. Their ages range from 33 to 88 years. Now, this brings the death toll to 622. Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has tested positive for COVID-19. According to the Trinidad Express, Dr. Rowley began experiencing flu-like symptoms yesterday evening and was subsequently tested for COVID-19. He is in isolation and is under medical supervision. Dr. Rowley was scheduled to receive his COVID-19 vaccine in Tobago today. Associate Professor at the School of Public Health at the University of Technology, UTech, Dr. Alveston Bailey, says he anticipates a significant fall in the COVID-19 case positivity rate over the next 2 weeks as a result of the weekend lockdowns put in place by the government. He believes strict enforcement of the measures would have a major impact on the country's case count.
Because many Jamaicans are still not yet willing to comply unless enforcement is instituted. I also think that it would be a good idea, based on observation, to also drop the weekly curfew from 8 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Professor Bailey says the half-day curfew on Saturdays could prove to be counterproductive. He's suggesting a full lockdown on weekends.
The gathering and the mixing and mingling which occurs between, say, 5 a.m. to 12 midday on Saturday might in fact be a super spreader event that could completely annul any benefits that would accrue from the rest of the Saturday lockdown and Sunday lockdown. Therefore, perhaps it might be a good idea to consider just having a total weekend lockdown.
And on the heels of the second weekend lockdown to contain the spread of COVID-19, government representatives are signing spin-off successes in multiple sectors. The measure, along with the e-commerce national delivery system ends, are being credited with health, security, and economic benefits. Herman Green has more.
The weekend lockdowns have the primary objective of controlling the spread of the COVID pandemic. According to Deputy Prime Minister and Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang, there are already positive results.
From the World Fund Ministry of Health, we are beginning to see some reduction or decline in the spike in Jamaica, and I expect it to continue.
While the true success in health is a dramatic fall in the number of new COVID-19 cases daily, Dr. Chang says there are other successes. He listed the economic and security sectors.
So the importance of keeping the economy going in the face of what's happening is very, very critical, and it does contribute to public order and reduce crime and criminal activity. And that's maybe the first program of this.
He argues that with fewer people on the roads, it's less likely for persons to get into mischief and illegal activities. Minister without portfolio in the National Security Ministry, Matthew Samuda, agrees, insisting that the lockdown and the ENDS program have increased compliance with road traffic and economic laws.
One of the things we've seen is that many businesses that were not compliant either with their up-to-date licenses have become so, including many bikes that were not up-to-date have paid for their carriage licenses, they've paid for their bike riding licenses. We're ensuring that they also have provided to us evidence of helmets. So some of the basic issues that plague the society all the time and the lack of structure in some industries is already being rectified.
Another lockdown is to be implemented at the end of this week. But even as Dr. Chang sings security successes over the past 2 weekends, killings have happened during the island-wide measure. In the first lockdown, there was a murder-suicide in St. Thomas, fueling the ongoing concern surrounding violence against women.
The reflection of an increasing level of what we might call acquaintance violence, which is troubling. And while we are looking at how to mitigate that from a security point of view, it is difficult, and we have to look at the overall issue of violence in the society, which, as I said, the Prime Minister pays special attention to, and we're going to work with the security forces and other agencies that can impact on behavior pattern.
Herman Green, TVJ News.
Meanwhile, the Marine Police are reporting that there were some defiance at several beaches and rivers over the second weekend of lockdown. However, they say there was full compliance at the Keys.
Three persons who are prosecuted will be taken before the court, and there are some persons warned in Black River, persons were warned for breaches and along the Elsha. In the Elsha area, some of those persons are seen and warned to leave the beach are actually persons who live close by, so we asked them to go inside, and there was much cooperation.
More homeless people were catered to during the lockdown in the corporate area on Monday. Over 600 of them were fed by the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, the KSAMC. Codian Barrett reports.
There's more than 2,000 persons living on the streets across Kingston and St. Andrew alone. According to the Chief Executive Officer of the KSAMC, Robert Hill, meals are provided twice per day. When our news team visited the downtown Kingston area, the homeless complained that while food was being issued, it was not adequate to feed everyone, and some only received one meal on Monday.
Saturday, the food van pulled up, there was 5 and the food van went down there. Sunday, the food van never come. Today, two food van come. The first food van come with bun and cheese and water, never enough. 2 man never get. The second lot come with rice and chicken, he never get none neither, because him get water. Enough never come.
If you go by the shopping center right now, when them do come by the shopping center, God bless. Food, war we all are war of it. You understand what I call? And the amount of food, not really can feed the people them.
While not disputing that meals were issued, one person said he was too late and now has to fend for himself.
I mean, I have nothing else to eat, you know. I'm going to get a $80 a while ago, I'm going to buy a pound of rice and beg little oil, beg little salt.
But still, they showed appreciation.
Them come with food, but not the food like as in say is a food, but we still appreciate it. Because I never give them nothing to put them. And that's why them do come with it. Them give bun and cheese, crackers, bread and water.
The municipal corporation says it will begin keeping records of persons it feeds each day. Kingston's Mayor Delroy Williams says the KSAMC is seeking to expand the feeding program.
In conjunction with the Ministry of Local Government, we did put in the infrastructure, construct a new soup kitchen at Church Street. Well, soup kitchen is the term, but it's really and put equipment in there to expand the program as best as we can. So we are expanding.
Mr. Williams says that the KSAMC should within a month have a central database of persons who are fed daily. Cody-Ann Barrett, TVJ News.
And it's time for a break here on the Midday News. Stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back, continuing the news. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett is cautiously optimistic about a new Centers for Disease Control CDC travel guideline that eliminates some testing and quarantine recommendations for people who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. But even as he remains hopeful, the development will augur well for Jamaica's tourism. He wants testing of visitors to continue. Sacheli Hamilton reports.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, in an update on Friday, advised that fully vaccinated Americans can now travel at low risk to themselves and don't need a COVID-19 test prior to travel unless it is required by the destination. They also won't need to self-quarantine after returning to the United States. The CDC considers someone fully vaccinated 2 weeks after receiving the last required dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. For Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett, the new guideline is an important development which must be considered by Jamaica. With an increase in travel among Americans expected, this could mean good news for Jamaica, whose tourism sector relies heavily on that country.
It is true that our largest source market, the U.S., is perhaps more vaccinated now than most of the developed countries. So what it means is that the U.S. is going to lead the world in terms of the vaccinated population in short order. And that sounds good for us.
However, the tourism minister says the testing of visitors to Jamaica must continue.
We think that keeping the 72-hour testing outcome is something that the world should embrace. And I think that along with the vaccination would be a good measure to help to influence changes in some of the protocol arrangements that we have in Jamaica as well as in the rest of the region.
But with the new guidelines, Mr. Bartlett is worried this could lead one step closer to the requirement for a so-called vaccination passport for international travel. The minister says while the United States and other developed countries are way ahead in terms of their vaccination program, Jamaica and other developing countries are lagging behind.
Though we have started and we're doing reasonably well, we're not there. So we would not be part of any call no for a standard vaccination protocol in regards to passports or so.
Sacheli Hamilton, TVJ News.
Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings today announced it will restart service this July with cruises from Jamaica, the Dominican Republic and Greece with the Norwegian Joy, Jade and Gem. The Jade will sail 7-day cruises to the Greek Isles from Athens starting on July 25. The Norwegian Joy will sail 7-day itineraries from Montego Bay starting on August 7, and the Norwegian Gem will launch service from the Dominican Republic on 7-day cruises starting on August 15. Sailing from Montego Bay, the Joy's calls include Harvest Key, Royton, Cozumel and Ocho Rios. The company said that the news was part of a two-pronged plan for its long-awaited return to cruising this summer. Also including the proposal, the company sent to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, yesterday, outlining its plan to restart cruising from U.S. ports starting July 4 and requesting the CDC lift the conditional sail order. Public Defender Arlene Harrison Henry is worried state witnesses could be exposed under the National Identification System, NIDS. She also accused the state of plans to trespass in people's personal lives by collecting large amounts of data about them. The details from Prince Moore.
Public Defender Arlene Harrison Henry made her contribution to the proposed NIDS bill on Wednesday, and she told the Joint Select Committee of Parliament that her office is worried that parts of the bill could lead to people in the Witness Protection Program being exposed.
That the legislation should provide more detail as to how these persons will be treated under the new regime and with specific provisions to put in place the continued protection of their identities, because that is the basis of the justice protection system. It's a concealment of identity, and in many instances, as you know, Minister, the complete change of identity, the change of location, sometimes the change of countries in which they live. And we have a concern, Minister, that we perhaps need to look at that again.
Justice Minister Delroy Chuck explained that the people who crafted the bill were wary of putting too much information about the Witness Protection Program in the bill because they do not want the wider public to know how the program works.
We weren't asking for it to be spelled out as to A, B, C, and D. But what our concern is that it is now subject to some agreement.
The public defender was adamant that the bill must address the witnesses specifically so that their safety is not compromised. She said it otherwise could determine how much information people share with the police or if they decide to become state witnesses. Mr. Chuck, in the end, told the public defender that the authorities will look at how NIDS will deal with state witnesses. The public defender, in the meantime, questioned why NIDS needed all the information it wants from people signing up. Between enrollment and verification, persons may be required to submit over 20 pieces of identity documents or biometric data to the state.
And there is no justification offered for this massive data collection, which we say result in trespasses and intrusions in a citizen's personal space.
Prince Moore, TVJ News.
Aaron Madden reports.
Citing its dissatisfaction that the organizers' planned COVID-19 precautions will not properly ensure athlete safety, FINA abruptly cancelled the Last Chance qualification event. Olympian Yona Knight Wisdom told TVJ Sports he received the surprising news last Thursday during one of his virtual competitions. He said the stunning news and its implications affected him immediately.
It was a pretty surreal feeling because I'd built up so much nervous energy getting ready for this competition, been prepping for weeks, and then it was all just taken away like that, and it took a little while to kind of come to terms with that.
SAJ President Martin Lin has also expressed disappointment with the late cancellation. Lin told TVJ Sports the association is hopeful measures will be put in place for Knight Wisdom to make it to Tokyo.
FINA is going to have to find an alternate championship prior to the Olympics because that will be the only way as a qualifying route for our diver to get to the Olympics. I mean, as he currently is ranked in the world, he would definitely be in the top 20. So therefore, he would in fact make it to the Olympics based on his qualification status at the moment. But unfortunately, that's not how the Olympics operates. They need a qualifying result.
While unclear about his next move, Knight Wisdom remains focused on preparations.
They said they would go back to the World Championships from 2019, where I finished 20th. So depending on how many places they select, I should be in a strong position to qualify for the Games. So until we find out from FINA, I will just try and keep on training hard in case I do need to perform at a World Champs or World Cup coming up soon. But the goal for me is Olympics this year still. Also looking longer term for the World Championships and the Commonwealth Games in 2022.
FINA has also criticized the Japanese government, which it said did not take all the necessary measures to ensure successful and fair competition. Karen Madden, TVJ Sports.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Ashade Masters. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, good afternoon.